Hey guys, I thought I'd do something a little bit different this week, so I'm going to go through some notes for you. We're going to talk about Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution. This outlines the executive branch. This presentation I will have set up as JPEGs on this page as you scroll down, and then at the very bottom, you could also download it and save it as a PDF if you choose to do so that way. Here we go, Article 2. So Article 2 outlines the executive branch. Section 1, it talks about the president and the vice president. Clause 1 of Section 1 of Article 2 gives the president a very broad executive power. That's the wording of the Constitution. It is open to interpretation often by presidents and by Congress, especially if the party in power in the White House is also the party in power in Congress. Then that executive power gets broader. If they're opposed to one another, then that executive power can maybe get a little bit tighter as they are in opposition. So Clause 1 also sets term length, so that sets it at 4 years. Clause 1 doesn't have anything about term limits. There were no term limits until after the 22nd Amendment gets adopted, limiting it to 2 terms. That's your mnemonic device. 22nd to 2 gives the president 2 terms. So, all right, there he goes. There's your mnemonic device, that one. Clause 2 creates the Electoral College. The Electoral College we will get into later on more in depth. As you guys are aware, it's kind of a hot button issue. If you paid attention in November, or even more notably 4 years ago in November in the 2016 election, a lot of people aren't crazy about the Electoral College. We'll look at its pluses and minuses later on. But to put it simply, it is a body of electors that aren't the American people, that are not Congress, that are separate from both, and every state gets a proportionate number of electors. You get the same amount of electors as you have members of Congress. So you have your members of the House based on population, and then you have 2 senators. So add those together. Clause 3 used to be how the system worked, and then it got modified by the 12th Amendment. So for as long as George Washington was running for president, the Electoral College worked perfectly. And then when he stopped running, it almost immediately fell apart. In 1796, it became a really close situation between Adams and Jefferson, and they were opposing parties. And the way it used to work is second place for president became vice president. So you had Adams as a Federalist, Jefferson as a Democratic Republican. Then in the year 1800, it got even worse when there was a tie. And then there were like 32 more ties until it finally got settled. So they changed it. We'll talk more about it later. Clause 4, Congress gets to choose the dates of elections. They get to choose the date the Electoral College convenes. Election day is always the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. There are reasons for this that may seem silly in our modern society, but it made sense when it was created. This law was passed over 100 years ago, like close to 200 years ago, but the idea being it's at that time of year because it's after the harvest but before the bad winter weather. It is on a Tuesday so that people to vote, they didn't have to travel on a Sunday. That was a religious stipulation, so that they didn't have to, quote, work on a Sunday, as a lot of different religions, especially the more conservative ones, wouldn't have allowed it. So back then you had to travel more to vote. It wasn't just up the street or across town. It was always on the Tuesday after the first Monday, so that if you owned a business, that you didn't have to decide, well, am I going to do my accounting and my bookkeeping or go vote? So it's always going to be between the 2nd and the 8th of November. They also choose the date of the Electoral College, which if you're watching this on the day it is published, would have been yesterday, December 14th this time. It's on the Monday after the second Wednesday in December, and I have never been able to find any single explanation as to why it's that weird date. I've looked. I even heard it talked about in a podcast, and they didn't explain it, so I'm not sure on that one. Clause 5, it gives the qualifications to be president. You have to be 3 things and 3 things alone. A natural-born citizen, at least 35 years old, and have been a resident of the United States for at least 14 years. So, this is all you need to be. All of the other qualifications that we'll talk about later on are informal qualifications, things the voting public requires of a president, usually. Clause 6, it provides for succession to the office. Now, this was vague at first. It says, in the case of removal, death, resignation, or inability, the duty shall fall to the vice president. Then when William Henry Harrison died in office, John Tyler said, I am now the president of the United States. And he got some pushback where people called him acting president. He said, no. I am reading this as I am now president. And eventually people started to accept that as the norm, but this became codified and was put into the 25th Amendment. So now, when a president leaves office before their term is over, the vice president becomes president. Clause 7, it sets the salary. The salary is decided by Congress. Last raise for the president was when they moved it from $100,000 a year to $400,000 a year. There's also an expense account. A lot of the stuff that happens at the White House comes out of that expense account. It is still taxpayer money, but it's taxpayer money that is set aside specifically. We don't really get too far into this stuff, although it can be interesting for those who are strong fiscally minded. And any changes to the president's salary, they wouldn't take place until the next president takes office. So if today, we'll call it Tuesday, December 15th, if Congress made a change, President Trump would not receive any, but once President-elect Biden becomes president, then he would receive that raise. It also contains the oath of office. The Chief Justice normally administers it, but that's not required. It says, I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. The President-elect will take that oath of office at noon on January 20th, and then is welcomed as the new President of the United States, or returning if they're reelected. This is a link you can't click on, but this would take you to a YouTube video of President Obama receiving the oath of office the first time around in a regular classroom setting. I used to do a brief discussion about how Obama took the oath 4 times due to circumstances, and the only person other than Obama to have done that was Franklin Roosevelt, who was elected to the office 4 times. All right, moving on. Section 2, President's powers and duties. Clause 1, the president, who is a civilian, is in charge of the armed forces. He is the commander-in-chief. He holds that title. This clause provides the basis for the cabinet, his group of advisors. Now, it doesn't establish the cabinet. It doesn't really establish the executive departments. What it does is says the president is allowed to ask for advice from the heads of executive departments. It gives the president the power to grant pardons and reprieves. This is presidential judicial power. We'll get into this later on. It's currently going on in the news right now. Oftentimes, just before a president is leaving office, that's when they issue their pardons. Often they'll save their more controversial pardons for that time, as there is less political fallout from those controversial decisions. Clause 2, the president has the sole power to make treaties which must be approved of in the Senate by you got a 2/3 vote. That is key to this, that the president is allowed to negotiate those treaties, but they have to be approved of by the Senate. If you remember your 9th grade U.S. history, When we talked about the Treaty of Versailles that ended World War I, Wilson wasn't able to get the Senate to approve of it. So we never signed the Treaty of Versailles. We never joined the League of Nations, even though Wilson created that, even though he was a negotiator at Versailles. It was up to the Senate. He also appoints federal officials. President Trump, he appointed 3 Supreme Court justices, as well as all other federal judges and officers of his executive branch. Also, if the Senate is not in session to confirm those appointments, temporary appointments can be made. It's supposed to be done for expediency, although sometimes it's done to get some more controversial choices put in without the Senate really approving of it at that time. And then they're in office, they're more likely to be approved. Section 3, powers and duties. President must deliver a State of the Union address to Congress from time to time. This has taken various forms over the years. We may talk about this down the road as well. He also offers a budget report and an economic report to Congress. He can send messages to Congress at any time, and he can call for a joint session of Congress. Now, some of these may seem silly, like, of course the president can talk to Congress, but again, this stuff was put into the Constitution because our founding fathers required this open line of communication between our branches. They didn't want to leave it to chance that Congress would deny the president the power to be able to do this. He can also adjourn Congress. If they are not doing the job they're supposed to be, he can send them home. He also is able to receive diplomatic representatives as almost like the host to America, where they come and visit the White House. There's usually a state dinner in the East Wing of the White House, things like that. And his main job, ensure the execution of all laws and policies as passed by Congress. Section 4, impeachment. We'll get more into this later as well. This process, you may have remembered back in January and February of 2020, President Trump was impeached. So the president, the vice president, all members of the executive branch, the department heads and the leadership there, federal judges, they are subject to removal from office by Congress. This is spelled out in Article 1, but what it does is has the House of Representatives bring the articles of impeachment, and then the Senate holds a trial and votes as to whether or not to remove the person from office. If you remember, President Trump was impeached in the House, and then he was acquitted in the Senate back in February. That's it. That's all I got for you on this one, guys. Make sure that you do the Article 2 check. You got 2 attempts on that one to get your high score, and keep working through this. All right, stay safe, guys. Bye.